going to do the taping, so we'll have a tape for this. All right, everybody, let's begin then. We finished looking at a series of prehistory. And Judaism really begins its history, interestingly enough, with the story of Abraham. And we're guessing it is a tribal recollection of somebody from long, long ago, far, far away. The dating of Abraham is roughly 1700 BCE. We are guessing this is not a real person, but a composite of several semi-nomad families that made an annual migration from north of Baghdad. And you can actually trace this on the map, the old routes they took. They went north, and it was traveled along the ancient Hittite Empire, the southern part of Turkey today, and then came down the coast into the land of Canaan, which would put us in what we now call the land of Israel. And they did this and then returned and did this yearly. And over a period of time, people got tired of this, and they found themselves spending more time in the land of Canaan and less time traveling. And over a couple of 100 years, 300-400 years, they decided to just stay. And they tried to maintain their identity, and it lasted for maybe 100 years or so, but intermarriage takes place. And then you get the beginnings of what ultimately we will call Israel. What gets buried in the history of all of this is the fact that a lot of the stories are really wish stories that get handed down. And if it hadn't been for modern archaeology, we would not know they were wish stories. Joshua did not conquer the land of Canaan with a three-pronged army of a massive size, because we now find it never happened. We found there was no massive destruction of Canaan. In fact, geologically, archaeologically, and anthropologically, we find Israel is probably 80% DNA Canaanite. You've got immigrants from the south, and I use that word literally, immigrants from the south who bring with them all kinds of recollections, including the word Yah for Yahweh. Remember, Moses's first wife was the high priest's daughter, Zipporah. He has two sons, which are conveniently named and forgotten because it didn't fit the narrative in Babylon, 1,000 years later. And then we've got these other stories, and we start doing archaeological reconstructions, and we find they're interesting stories. But you didn't find a lot of the stuff they said was true. A lot was, but a lot wasn't. So the role of the modern scholar is, how do you shift stuff that we know is true? The Babylonians did, in fact, sack Jerusalem. The Assyrians did attack and wipe out the northern kingdom of Israel. There are stories that were dirt, that people didn't want said, and that somehow got into the narrative. The story of David and Bathsheba is not a pleasant story. Not only that, the story of David premeditating the murder of her husband is not a pleasant story. So you've got some stuff that's really, really harsh and there, and other stuff is made up. And I told you the famous story of Joshua conquering the city of Ai is an embarrassment. The priestly tradition writing in Babylon saw Ai, and they saw a capital A and I. They thought it was a noun. They thought he conquered the great pagan city of Ai. In fact, we now learn, are you ready for this? We now learn Ai was an adjective. It was a small ai, and it meant, are you ready for this, heap of ruins. So writing hundreds of years later, they have Joshua conquering a heap of ruins. This is what archaeology does. It brings things. So a lot of what we have in the Hebrew Bible is wish, others is actual history. And how do you sort out one from the other? That's the ongoing question. It's also true for the New Testament as well. A lot is ideas, a lot of thoughts, and some is actual fact. So that's the great quest. So when we look now at the story of the garden, that starts in prehistory. And who had prehistory? Remember, there are two Jewish groups in exile in Babylon that are mostly responsible for probably 80% of the Hebrew Bible we have today. One is a priestly group, and this is a group that has deep and ancient roots, because there are always people that want rituals. And when you have rituals, And I say this kindly. Let me just backtrack. Have you ever gone to a division of motor vehicles? Did you ever know, no matter wherever you go to a division of motor vehicles, the people there are all the same? There's a certain type of personality that gets attracted to working in the division of motor vehicles. Have you ever noticed that? No matter what state you're in, what country you're in, there's a certain type of bureaucrat that seems to get attracted to that. You'll also go, if you ever have to fill out forms for something for a county, there's a certain type of bureaucrat, there's a certain type of personality that gets attached to that. Well, there's certain types of personalities that get attracted to rituals. And unfortunately, a lot of these personalities insist that there is only one type of ritual that can be done at a certain type of occasion, and it must be done in a certain way. And by the way, Christianity is loaded with these kinds of individuals, as is every other religion. And for instance, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but to give you an example, you should hear the heated discussion. No, you shouldn't. This would upset you all. You should hear the heated discussions of, I'm serious about this. Now, don't laugh at me. How do you hold your hands when you are at the Lord's table, or a communion table, or an altar table, whatever you wish to call it? How do you hold your hands? If you're officiating, do you hold your hands like this, like this, like this, like this, like this? Do you hold them outwardly? There are about 10 different ways you can hold your hands. How do you make the sign of the cross? I told you the story about the time I made the sign of the cross when a Catholic asked me to bless her rosary when she was in my former full-time congregation. And it turns out the Russian Orthodox told me it's great that I was doing this, but I made the sign of the cross wrong, and I'm not even used to making the sign of the cross. There is a big deal about this. If you make the sign of the cross left to right, that's Roman Catholic, folks. No, 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 no. You make the sign of the cross to the right, not to the left, to the right. And this is a big deal because when you're in Europe, you can tell very quickly what kind of Christian you are, the right kind or the wrong kind, by the way they make the sign of the cross. Jesus is weeping about this, I hope. And so I remember in divinity school, the fights that people got into about how you go about ceremonial rituals and the way you hold your hands, the way you stand, the way you do this. And I'm thinking, if there's a God, I hope God is on vacation in Aruba and not listening to these discussions. So there are certain types of people that get attracted to this. And so you have a long history. I mean, seriously, have you ever read the Hebrew Bible and you get in book of Exodus and you have these priestly vestments and the way things are done? I'm saying these were a bunch of peasants. Where the heck are they going to find any of this material to make priestly vestments? Who's going to have gold thread? Who's going to have, these are peasants. These vestments didn't even come into being till hundreds of years after they were in the desert. But you get the priests trying to impose stuff from it. All religions do this. So you get a priestly contingent, then you get another contingent, which is absolutely convinced everything that happened to us is our fault. So the Deuteronomic group believes that we got everything we deserve because we pissed off God. And the reason we pissed off God is because we didn't do what God said. And then so you answer, well, what are we supposed to do? What did God say? And they said, it's funny you mentioned that because don't pay attention to anything unless you got it from us. So the Deuteronomists said, yes, you pissed off God because you didn't do what God said, but we know what God said, and here it is. If you read anything else, it's wrong. Don't you just love? And all religions are like this. So we get two groups in Babylon. Now, other information will sneak in. And final editors, much to the horror of P and D, will include this other information, which will become absolutely annoying. The story of David and Bathsheba, the story of how he got Uriah murdered, the story of all the lists of the Canaanites in the land of Canaan who remained there and their names, and the story of Abraham. Well, what does his son do? Ishmael doesn't go away. And the story of Ishmael's tribes being mentioned again and again and again, including Esau marrying Ishmael's granddaughter. That shocks everybody. So I'm saying inconvenient information all over the place that couldn't be edited out. Welcome to the real world. So what do you do if you're in Babylon? It's 500 BC or so. And you've got to talk about prehistory. Where's your source? And who's your source going to be? The Babylonians, because you don't have any prehistory. You simply don't have any. So where is your template? Here we go. Let me pull up a shared screen and let's take a look at this. Now, I probably did a bad thing of this, so let me try. Let me try this again. Let's see if I can pull this up again. And I don't know how. I wish I could. Can I rotate this? Yes. Aha! Can you all see this? Can everybody see this?
Not to read.
All right, let's see.
I can see it.
Okay, but I gotta see if I can make it bigger. Can you see that now? Over here.
Yep.
Everybody see this here? Okay. There was a very, very famous Orientalist, was the term back there, E.A. Spicer, who was the one who really upset everybody by pointing out the stories of the floods and the stories of creation did not originate with Hebrew scribes. It was straight copying directly from previous pagan sources, which of course is going to upset traditionalists very, very much. He is closely related to traditional Mesopotamian beliefs. It may be safely posited that the Babylonians did not take over these views from the Hebrews, since cuneiform accounts, among which Enemo Elish is but one, are relatively stereotype and formulation antedate in substance the biblical statements on the subject, which means if you look at cuneiform tablets, they are much, much, much older, all of them, than any of the stories that are in the Hebrew Bible. So you've got that factually. Of greater importance is the stream of biblical tradition sometime in the latter half of the second millennium. That's talking about D and P right about the 500s. However, none of this finally takes shape really till about 300 BCE. So it takes D and P a long time to get this down, but after they are removed from the scene and are no longer active, a final group of editors comes in and includes material they would have died had they seen the material. That's why we get stories about lists of pagans, lists of Canaanites, list of unpleasant material, list of unflattering material, lists that upset the story they want you to get uninterrupted. The final editors have all kinds of interruptions, which means you're going to have disagreements. In a classic example of this, let me pull this up very, very quickly just to remind everybody how this happens. A classic example is this. We've seen this before, so you get an idea of what I'm talking about. Look at this very, very quickly. This is 2 points of view, and a final editor did this. The view here, thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as one would speak to a friend. But then you go down here, you cannot see my face, for no one shall see my face and live. Now, if there isn't a contradiction, what are you going to get? What do you do if you're some poor person and you have a chance to see God face to face? And on one side, he says, you see me as a friend, yay. No, you see me and you die. What you're going to do is wet yourself and say, and scream. That's what these editors did. And they had 2 conflicting stories. And so they decided to put them together and let you choose and hope for the best. So you see this all over the place. And by the way, you're going to see this in 2 flood stories too. There's the famous 140 days, but I bet you didn't know there was one 150 days. Yes. Okay, so we go back here then to Enemo Elish. Enemo Elish is, if you will, the second oldest we've got. The first one is Athrasis, and we'll talk about that when we get to the flood. A riff off Athrasis is Enemo Elish, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. But in Babylonian and Mesopotamian thought, there is no division between science and religion. Traditional tenets of Babylonian science, In ancient times, science often blended into religion. To that extent, therefore, scientific conclusions were bound to be guided by underlying religious beliefs. The Babylonian creation story features a succession of various rival deities. The biblical version, on the other hand, is dominated by a monotheistic concept in the absolute sense of the term. In short, what you're saying is Jewish scribes took the science of the day, the 7 days, deleted deities and substituted Yahweh Elohim. They said your science was correct, your theology is wrong, we'll correct it by putting in Yahweh Elohim. This, of course, is going to upset traditionalists because that means you've used a pagan background for all of what you're saying. Well, it's not my fault, it's the way it is. And here you go. Here is Enuma Elish. Light emanating from primeval chaos, light emanating from the gods, creation of the firmament, dry land, luminaries, man, celebrate and rest. Desolate waste, creation, firmament, dry land, luminaries, creation of man, God rests. 7 and 7. When traditionalists read this, they were absolutely horrified. And now we have a phrase, and I think you know the phrase, willful ignorance. There are people who just simply willfully choose not to see what's in front of them. And our history as a species has a long history of this, as you well know. I don't know if any of you were aware of a classic example of this in American history, and then we'll go to Genesis 1. In American history, we had a huge outbreak of yellow fever, and it was coming up the Mississippi River. It started in New Orleans, it was coming up the Mississippi River. This is a true story, and the merchants in Memphis kept on being told you needed to have some blockades, and you need to blockade the blockade from coming in here, any people or any goods, about 100 miles away to protect the city. But the city council, all of whom were wealthy merchants from Memphis, said, no, this is simply not true. You're making it's fake news, if you will. As it's coming up the Mississippi River, about 50 miles out, everybody before that area is getting sick and dying, and they're told this is the last chance you have. And they said, no, this is nonsense. You're just making this up. You want to take our money. The yellow fever hit Memphis. Literally, all of those people on the board that made that decision died. Their families died, and a good chunk of the white people in town died. The majority of the white people. The slaves did not, because unbeknownst to most people, the slaves in Africa had developed immunities over the centuries because they had been bitten and infected, so they got sick, but they survived. But here was a chance several times to protect the city, and willful ignorance intervened, and they all died. This is nothing new. I mean, you see this all the time. Look at people who won't wear masks. People have said vaccinations are good. And by the way, if Franzel is recording this, it was interesting. One of the guys who testified at the school board, listen to this, doesn't even have kids in the school system, and takes his kids to a school that is you're not allowed to attend if you vaccinated or believe in vaccination. And he was a major one testifying before the school board who they listened to. Moving right along, let's go to Genesis 1. We're arguing that this comes from Enuma Elish, and let's go to Genesis 1 as a background. And so we're going to see then, where did you go? I thought I had Genesis 1 here, documents. All right. Doug, you feel like reading? Thank you.
Yep. Starting from the beginning?
Yep, number 1.
When God began to create the heavens and the earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters.
Okay, now stop right here. Most people don't even remember this of 1 and 2. This is directly from the mess that it was before the Earth became. By the way, as we're watching the telescope, I was reading something that caught me completely off guard. They talk about the Big Bang, but what was before the Big Bang? Think about that. What was before the Big Bang? There were things there that had to come together to bang. So what was there? Ron unmuted. Therefore, Ron, you can read now.
Uh-oh. All right. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Okay, now stop. Did you notice here, at no point is there an Adam or is there an Eve? And did you notice there's no discussion here? This is it. This is going to happen. It's it. Boom. That's it. So you've gone from chaos, darkness covered the face of the deep, and a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Notice that we've already you've got the Babylonian chaos, but rather than having gods and deities, you have one God. And this would be in Hebrew, Yahweh Elohim, or just G -D or A -- for Adonai, which means the Lord. Okay, if you continue.
And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
All right, now remember, this is prehistory. So this is something P and D accepted. And
I'm
then
just
the rest of
wondering-
us accepted it as too. Yes, Doug?
I'm just wondering which time zone he was in, because
Oh dear.
day and night.
I'm gonna have to join Ken with that spliff, you know, honestly.
Just let me point out that I don't know who this person is. His name is Doug Claus. He's no relation to me whatsoever. And it just goes to prove that there are many branches on a tree, some of which need to be pruned. Having said, all right, who else wants to read? Who else wants to read? Who's reading here this morning? Maureen, can you see? Maureen's on. Danny Yorkin, can you read?
Okay.
Number
And
3.
God-
Number 6, rather, verse 6.
Right. And God said, "Let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome.
Okay, now stop. Remember now, that means we've got 2 sets of cosmology here. You've got everything under the dome, which would be us, and then you've got everything beyond the dome. They really don't get into that. Go ahead, Danny.
And it was so. God called the dome sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day.
So that's the dome, which goes beyond the dome, we don't get into. Okay, who else would like to read?
Well, what's beyond the dome is the heavenly sphere, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else want to read? Anybody else want to read again?
Sure, I will.
Okay, go ahead, Nanette. Do all of 9 through the 3rd day. Go ahead.
And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called the seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it."
Now, I was wondering if marijuana was included in this. I'm sorry, you see that all these kinds of plants. One of my students referred to this as devil's lettuce. I've never heard that phrase.
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean, oh yeah, you've heard of that phrase?
Oh, yeah.
Oh God. All right, that's where I have not been. All right, so we've got all kinds of fruit and seeds, and a lot of you are really into having plants in the house. Besa has something like 120 plants. She just has this thing about how they give energy and life around her. Maria has now placed these great hanging baskets out front, and I'm embarrassed to say they have changed the whole front of the house. They made it, rather than just being a house, a very welcoming, friendly, lovely place. And I kept on thinking, why did we do that before? still the plants. Okay, go ahead, Nanette.
Okay, where was I? And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants, I read that already. Plants yielding seed of every kind and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed. And God saw it was good.
Okay, keep on going. Keep on going then. Go ahead.
And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be, whoops, too fast, and let them be for signs for the seasons. And I've got to close down all of you. There we go. And for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth.
Yeah, now notice again, there's nothing above the dome. We're only dealing with what we see. There's nothing above the dome. And by the way, I never noticed that before. I never thought about it. I was so concentrating on the dome, I forgot there's the above the dome. And I think Danny was right. It was kind of like just considered the heavens, whatever was out there was considered whatever it was. Okay, go ahead.
God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day.
Okay, now that's if you try to think of a dome, that means that the moon and the sun and the stars are under the dome, but that's what's beyond the dome. And that's never really mentioned, is it? Okay, Doug, you want to restart verse 20 then? If anybody else want to read, anybody else will go with Doug and Ron and Danny again. And then Nanette, go ahead.
A little larger. And God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky. So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves of every kind with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day.
Okay, Ron, you want to do number 24?
And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things.
Now, wait a minute,
and
don't
wild-
you love that phrase, creeping things?
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you have just get your skin gets nuts if you see something creeping like a centipede or snakes or anything. I have borderline arachnophobia. And I remember, and I don't know why this is, I never understood this. And then, you know, human beings do stupid things. There was a movie, I'm going to say 30 or 40 years ago, probably the all-time spider movie ever made. It was called Arachnophobia. Now, why I would go to see a movie like this, this shows you how stupid our species is. I paid to absolutely scare myself to death. And the hero of this, the hero of this was an Amazon parrot spider, which is the largest spider in the world. It is a member of the tarantula family. And the guy, I have no idea how this happened. I never watched TV. I watched very little TV except at night, at Netflix or something. But back then, for some reason, I was somewhere, and there was a guy on the Today Show with the spider in the movie, and the thing took up his whole shoulder. That's how big it was. And the head and the legs were like this long, and the leg was on the back, scratching his head. And he's patting this thing and said, they're very sweet. And I almost wet myself. And I'm thinking, good Lord, look at this thing. And he thought this was lovely. I was like, and this movie had like, I don't know where they got all the spiders from. I mean, I have no idea where they got. And I think, why would I pay myself to go to see a movie like this, in which half the time I was holding onto the seats of the movie theater and I probably drained all the blood into my hand fingers. Why do you even remember see the movie Jaws? Do you remember that the first time the shark went out of the water at the end and opened up and we all jumped out of the seats? Remember that? Everybody jumped out of the seats and screamed. And that was the first time I thought, why do we do this? I mean, you know, it's a hard thing. You see Stephen King's movies. I mean, like, read the books. I mean, like, what? Anyway, creeping things. I wanted to talk about God. Did you have to make all of these? I mean, is this necessary? I mean, just, I mean, there's some of these things that you know what I'm saying? It would be nice if we had an input at this point. Okay, go ahead, Ron. I mean, who's reading? Who's reading? Ron
Yeah.
was. Ron,
Cattle
why
and
didn't you have
creeping-
any input? Why didn't you make a suggestion at this point? That we didn't need some kinds of creeping things. You let us down.
Really?
Yeah, you should have intervened at this point.
You were on a roll. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay,
Um,
go ahead.
I think I may be, next and last, but probably least too.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead. Wait, let Ron finish with verse 25. Danny, you pick it up at 26.
Okay. Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind. And it was so.
Okay,
But-
now, Danny, I want you to stop with after the red part.
Okay, after the red part.
Yeah, right here, after.
Okay. According to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of
No,
the
right here,
air.
verse 26, verse 26.
That
Oh,
is 26. Yeah, that's 26.
yeah, I don't know why you said after the red part, like you didn't want me to read the first part of that sentence in 26? I wasn't sure what you meant, Ken.
Yeah, I will just read the first part and stop after the word image.
Oh, I see. All right. I thought you were, okay. Then God said, let us make humans in our image.
Okay, now I'm going to stop the share for a minute and see if any of you picked up what is a key word.
Our,
Huh?
the plural, our.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. Oh, this is a good group. Yeah.
You taught us good.
Yes. Our. Talked about who's the our.
Right. Not my image, our image. Interesting.
Yeah, our. Who's the our?
Is it anything like the imperial we?
No, this gets interesting. This gets really annoying too.
Is
Does
it the
that-
omnipotent counsel of they? When it
Yes.
really said,
They. It was understood. I love how, I love when you're taking a class and they say, well, it was understood. I never know who's the they it's understood. Who's they that's understood? Evidently, I've never understood anything. Because every time it's taken a class, well, obviously everybody understood. Well, I always seem to be the
I
one.
also noticed that the humans was plural.
Yes. Okay, so we'll get back to them up. Our. Evidently, it was understood, and I didn't know this. It was understood that God was not alone. I didn't know that. I mean, that struck me. I never even thought about that. I never thought about that. Now, in the book of Job, remember we did Job, we talked about a heavenly council. Remember? Job in the heavenly council and Job, Satan wasn't bad. Remember we had to recalibrate what we thought about Job. In Job, Satan was a member of the heavenly council. Remember? He was a member of the heavenly council. Remember that? And it said Job went to and fro and reported back to the heavenly council. And so there was this heavenly council. And if Job is written somewhere between 500 and 300, that is the same time the final editions are being put together of J and P and all that unintended information that nobody wanted us to have. Those final editors were getting the same thing. And I guess it was just assumed that God was never alone. Now, that must be a riff off of Mesopotamian ideas because there was always lots of gods. So there was a supreme, the God, but then there were lesser gods. And so it was assumed, I'm reading, that there was a heavenly council, but they never tell us who was on the heavenly council. And the thing that bothers me, I'd like to know how you get on. No, seriously. I mean, they don't tell us. because I would like to know what other I mean, these deities that are running around here, like they're candidates. There are candidates. Now, I'm not joking when I say that. There are candidates. Well, yes, I was going to say there are angels that get mentioned, Gabriel and Michael. But then there are the offspring of God's kids. If anybody remember the offspring of God's kids, does anybody remember that? Let me pull that up. Let me pull that up. God had sons. Yes, I love this passage. I'd have this read at my funeral. That sounds strange. Never mind. Stop that, Kenneth. Let me get that. Let me get that. Where is that? Oh, here it is, right here. Oh, yes, Ron, how would you like to read this? 6.
Okay. When people began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them.
Now stop. Remember, if you're a woman, right off the bat, this is a major flag. Why is he just talking about daughters? This is not going to be good. You know that intuitively. If they said sons and daughters, that's fine. But when you single out daughters, you know this is not going to go well. You know that intuitively. Go ahead.
The sons of God.
Did you know that God had sons?
I forgot that. Yeah, that's
Yes,
right.
you forgot. God had sons. Hey, Nanette's looking at this and where did this come from? Nanette, nobody knows. Nobody has a clue how this made it in the Hebrew Bible.
Could the phrase sons of God be thought of in terms of all humans are sons and daughters of God because God created them?
No, that's a liberal way of looking at it, because see what happens next. You'll see what happens next. That's nice, but that's not what happens. It turns out the boys have some hormones. Go ahead, Ron.
The sons of God saw that they were fair.
Fair is a nice, polite King James type of word.
Hot.
Boys were horny and they saw they were hot. As I
Exactly.
explain this to my class, imagine you're on South Beach and the sons of God have gone wild seeing a bunch of bikini teenage girls. I said, this is basically what it amounts to. Fair is a nice, pleasant word, like saying you knew your wife. I mean, you don't want to use what new really means, so you say something pleasant and you know.
Innocuous.
Yeah, innocuous is a good word. That's a good innocuous. Fair is an innocuous word here. All right, go ahead.
And they took wives for themselves.
Did you notice it wasn't a negotiation? Hey, dude, I'm God's son. I will tell you know, just you're mine. Pat, I'm sorry, Pat Sullivan. Yo, dude, you're my wife. Yes. She says, you have no choice in this. Just took. That's not an innocuous word, by the way. Took means you grabbed, you took. This is not nice behavior, by the way. You would think God brought God's sons up to behave differently. Did that cross anybody's mind here, by the way? Is anybody asking this question in the back of your mind? Like, what kind? Preacher's kids. Preacher's kids. The word rabbi's kids. The worst kids in the world. Rabbi's kids and preacher's kids. All right, let's see what they did. Go ahead, Ron. You're on a roll.
And they took wives for themselves of all that they chose.
Oh, not one. You get lots. Wee-haw! You get redheads, blonde heads, blue heads. You get pigtails, you get afro hair, name it. You get it all, folks. Skinny, big, tall, short. Wee-haw! A virtual menagerie of all kinds of women's. Yes, because you're God's son. Now, don't look at me like that. That's what it says. I'm just telling you what it really says without being innocuous. Sorry, go ahead, Ron.
Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh. Their days shall be 120 years.
Now stop. Did you see God getting mad at his sons anywhere here? Do you see anything like my spirit shall not abide in my sons? Or I've decided my sons cannot do this, or this is bad behavior. I apologize on behalf of did you get any of that? No, he gets mad at humans. Now, this I think is a riot, because this is not what you and I get with gaming or with what you get with stories about the Watchers from Enoch and how that still is around. I know idea. Go ahead, read the last part, Ron.
The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans who bore children to them.
Now you have the very, very famous beginnings of what? Demigods.
Yeah.
Right now, read the last sentence in because nobody picks this up. This is a
Sorry,
very
sorry,
fascinating thing.
shouldn't this be banned in Florida?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. I should get up and read that at the council and say, would you ban this?
Yeah.
Oh, that is brilliant. Yes, read the one. This is even worse. Read the one in red.
These were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown.
Nobody ever sees that sentence. They were told that this is bad. These are watchers. These are bad omens, blah, blah. That's not what the text ever said. Some fly-by-night group called Enoch, it's not even in the Hebrew canon. It's kind of a apocryphal writing, came up that these were bad, but that's never what the text said. The children of the sons of God and the daughters of men were heroes of old and warriors of renown. Whoa. So us, we talk about why aren't one of these on the heavenly council? You're getting more of a hero. I would like to know, and they never tell you who's on the heavenly council, and that starts a whole mythology, just like Lilith. You have all these ideas out there, but you never told. It's never told. Lilith is never mentioned in the canon, and neither are we told who's on the heavenly council. Now, obviously, you would think somebody has some kind of divinity, but what does that mean? Angels aren't human, but they're not God. And what do you do with God's grandchildren? I mean, you never thought of that, did you? Did you ever think of God having grandchildren?
No.
I mean, isn't that what this suggests, though? God has sons, and they have children with women. That makes them grandchildren. That's kind of freaky in a way. Yes, that would get banned, I think, banned in Florida. Okay, we'll go back then to the Genesis one.
That and Ecclesiastes.
Oh, yes. We have, complete, we haven't got Ecclesiastes. Okay, then. So let's go, Danny, if you would start then, continue this 26 and 27.
Where was I? God said, let us make humans in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the
Okay,
air.
stop right there. Did you notice according to our likeness?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting thought, because when you get to the fact, and I'm not being rude here, what are we basically? Everybody remembers there's 98.8% chimpanzee.
Right.
So really, that famous book, The Naked Ape, is not far off. I mean, by the way, I keep on asking this question, and I'm always amazed that we're all in the same boat. Have you ever seen a full-grown chimpanzee? We are very puny next to them.
Yeah.
Seriously, have you ever seen how big and strong? I mean, the shoulders alone and the muscular. I mean, you ever take a look at these?
They're
I
much
mean, very
stronger than
frankly,
humans.
huh?
Yeah, chimps could basically tear a human being apart limb by limb if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, you do not
And-
want to get in an angry group of chimps and you're in their territory and they're telling you very quickly to leave and you don't want to prove, well, I'm a human, you're just a bunch of dumb chimps. You won't be around very long.
And I think that testifies to the bravery of Jane Goodall when she first started to live with chimps too. She was really taking a risk.
Yeah, and she was with was she with the chimps or great apes?
No, she was with the chimps. The great apes was
Diane,
Diane Fossey.
Fossey. That's right. That's right.
Gorillas was Diane Fossey.
Right.
Yeah.
Goodall was with chimps.
Right. I mean,
And
think about
Diane
that.
Fossey met her end at the hand of other humans, not the gorillas.
Yep.
Say that again, Danny. I missed you. What?
Diane Fossey, who was, did you ever see the movie Gorillas in the Mist? It was about Diane Fossey. And she met her end. She was killed by other humans, not by the gorillas. She
Oh,
was-
that's right. That's right. Wasn't it poachers?
yeah.
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 Yep.
protecting them.
Yes.
Protecting the gorillas.
Okay, Danny, go ahead and continue then, if you would.
Okay, where was I? Over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the wild animals of the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humans in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them.
Now, did you notice male and female here are equal? That seems to escape a lot of narratives. I'm always fascinated by people who say they take the Bible literally. And I said, okay, if that's what you do, you do. But if you're going to take it literally, then why don't you take the whole thing literally? There it says males and females. And usually those people who take the Bible literally put women in the second-class category, but that's not what the text says.
They would of course point to the Eve and Adam and Eve thing where God says, Eve, you shall obey Adam, you know.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, they're forgetting the other text. Just notice the sin of omission. Okay, what I'd like us to do then is I'd like us then to finish this story next time. Notice again, I mentioned how these verses and chapters are artificial. Here's a classic example. The scroll in Hebrew scripture ends on a column here. Stephen Langton, the Archbishop of Canterbury in the 1200s, broke these up artificially into chapters and verses. So you wind up saying that you wind up saying then that the second creation story ends at chapter 2, verse 3. It's broken up. It's an artificial. So you need to know, again, the chapters and verses are artificial, and sometimes it doesn't work. And you need to know that. So this is not biblical. It was added in the 1200s. It is artificial. You also need to know when you read the Hebrew Bible, there are going to be words we have no idea what they meant and still don't. And you're also going to need to, when you read the New Testament, the same thing is true. People have no idea what a person meant by this or that. And all I have to say is I'm glad that nobody ever asked that we do a study of the book of Revelation. I taught 3 classes on that, and I'm glad not to teach it again. It is really almost kind of a horror story from Stephen King, dated about 90. And how it made it into the canon is an interesting story of politics and swapping. Most people are not aware it took 400 years for the New Testament to be put together. Did any of you know that? It took 400 years.
I knew it took a long time. What was that last phrase you said? It was
Politics and swapping.
swapping.
Yes, in other words, I want this, but you have to include that.
Oh.
Yes, I know this is Hebrew Bible. Let me just share something with you very quickly. Because my students just got this class this past week, and they were dumbfounded. Let me go back and show you something that they were introduced to that my classes never seemed to get. Let me go back to just show you what they were just flabbergasted about. First of all, the students had no idea that it took that long for the New Testament to be put together. Then I showed them this. This is all the writings that we had. This is just the first page now. Look at this. Everybody take a quick gander of this. Look at all the writings. Look at the vast number of these. Can you see that? Goes down to 180. That's just stop. Then go over to this and look at this. Yes, all of these to 250, 300. It will take swapping, this gets very embarrassing, horse trading and politics to finally get that small, tiny New Testament. It's very small. And you're going to look at some of the stuff and wonder, how did this ever make it into a New Testament canon? And you need to know their works here. Here's a work you never heard of. This was written by the Bishop of Rome, it's a brother. And the shepherd is an analogy of Jesus, and Jesus is very human in here. It almost made it in. And another one you never heard of is, oh, you might know, I can't find it. It was the letter of Clement, First Clement, and they've got Second Clement. It's First Clement, and you might know it's not here. Let me see if it's back on the first one. This letter reads better than most of us.
It was at the top of that page.
Huh?
It was at the top of that last page.
Oh, it was? First Clement?
Yep.
There we go. This was probably written about 100, we're going to guess. It's better than anything Paul ever wrote. And so I'm just saying there are things in here that should have made, and other stuff like Revelation. If you ever read Jude, it's like an afterthought. I mean, why? It was all a matter of horse trading and politics. And my students are dumbfounded when they see all of this. And they were absolutely dumbfounded when they see all this. And I said, it gets pared down to, and usually some students said politics was involved, wasn't it? I said, well, how do you get from all of this? This is, we have more we can add to this now. How do you get all this to this the little tiny New Testament you've got? So I'm just sharing with you that we face all of this. How do you pare things down? How do you work at stuff? And how do you talk about the last part of this, be fruitful and multiply and have responsibility and dominion? That phrase we're going to get when we come to this next time about you shall have dominion over them meant responsibility. It didn't mean lord it over, kill off everything and slaughter people. It meant, there you go, like drafting a school curriculum. So when we get to dominion, dominion means responsibility. And that's something that gets lost as well. Then if you want, let's finish this out with going to the flood stories. That really ends this. That's prehistory. You go from the garden to Enemu Elish, Gilgamesh, and then the priestly tradition having no choice because they have no prehistory. And then we go to the flood stories and we know a flood actually happened, which makes this interesting. Does that work for everybody? And then you guys piggyback to where you want to go with either finishing a Karen Anderson, which is cheap, $1.99 right now. Roy, is that on Amazon? I'm on Amazon. Okay. You want to get cheap on Amazon? And then
put a link in the chat.
yeah, okay. I saw that before. We'll put it again. And I'll send it out again. And let me remind, then you can also take a look at, if it's of any interest to you, of how a committee gets put together. And by the way, this is not unusual on search committees for synagogues and churches. Synagogues and churches operate very much the same way. I don't know if you knew that. Reformed synagogues, conservative synagogues, and Protestant churches all operate the same way. You have a board and you have search committees. And so oftentimes people don't want to get involved in a search committee. And then it's an interesting thing how they get formed. Some are brilliant and some, well, we are what we are. There's a famous quote from the very first comic novel of English literature. Let me read to you this quote. I hope you love this. We are, all of us, as God made us, and many others, much worse. That's from Tom Jones, first comic novel of English literature. Let me read that to you again. Said very, 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 very serious. We are, all of us, as God made us, and many others, much worse. Yes. When my students are having a bad time, I read them that, and I read them the following. We are born naked, wet, and hungry. And then things get worse. Moving right along then. You've got all kinds of things to think about. And then when we have a chance next time, we have a long break and I'm not teaching. If you want me to come back, we can do something else. But in the meantime, you've got interesting books as long as you keep them audio, because a lot of people like audio books. It's very, very helpful. Now, let me see if Franzella, she may or may not be here. So I want to keep things.
I'm here.
Okay, can you stop recording now?